máa làdúrà ẹni. Àgbà tó mòye, ẹ jọ̀wọ́ ẹ tọ́mọ sọ́dọ̀ òtítọ́ kan lè ṣeré láyé. Àníṣe yẹn làwúre gangan. Àgbà tó mòye, ẹ jọ̀wọ́ ẹ kọ́mọ níwà gidi kan lè ṣeré láyé.
A few years ago at a poetry event in Ibadan here. Yes. And I remember you coming in and I was like totally transfixed. I was like, oh my goodness, Professor Osundare is there, you know. And then for you to come up on stage, I think you didn't come up, you were standing there. Yes. And then you started speaking about how much you liked my work, and my head was just swelling like that. You know, it was such a wonderful, for me, that's probably the biggest memory of that occasion. Yeah, it was wonderful. But something that struck me that day was your total belief in poetry. And you kept talking about it. And recently I read something online about where you said, it's a speech you gave recently, where you said something that I find really, you know, I know some people will say because he's a poet, you know, he can say these things, but I like them. I think there's something that our society has lost, and I think you are trying to remind us to push us back there. So let me start from the top. It says, you say, poetry matters. Poetry matters. That's huge. In our modern society, poetry really matters? It does matter? That's my first question. But Kinto, before we answer that question, I want to read what you wrote. Poetry matters because it never fails to remind us of the common color of the blood in our veins, the violence of hunger, the ugliness of evil, the frailty of our forests, I like that one, the vulnerability of our rivers, and the sigh of our planet. And then you go on and on about other things, but me as a musician, this is the one that poetry is the soulmate of music, the sister of song. Poetry beats the drum of language. In many cases, it is the very drum itself. Talk more about this to us. Yes. In a language that most of our people will understand, because many of them, they think of poetry as something that you write in a book. I know what you understand.
Yes, I know. Yes, before I go into this, one or two sentences too. Thank you very, very much for coming. But even more important, thank you very much for the work you have been doing.
Thank you, sir.
I have made references to your works here in Nigeria in the classroom, over there in the United States. Some time ago I was in Korea. I also talked about it. I was not terribly surprised that people know you in Korea.
Oh, wow.
Korea South. Wow. You've said so much about my poetry, but I must tell you that the inspiration is mutual. Yeah. There is a way in which you validate what most of us are doing in the classroom. You know, I'm a professor. I teach the theory of poetry, what we call poetics. I do the writing itself, and I read all these fat books about scholars who say, no, a poem is a poem, art is art, politics is politics. The two cannot meet. Many people in the western part of the world believe that. But we've been telling them, I think they call them formalists. You know, all that is important in the work is the architectonics of it, the shape, the form, and so on. So you have a beautiful bottle, a very beautiful bottle of beer, but there is no beer in it. Yes. What I see in your work most of the time is this blend, riveting blend between form and content, between feeling and thinking. And I tell you, it's not just that I enjoy what I see, I do. I sway. You know, I come from a musical background, I sway and so on. But I also think, you know, we all fit same pond, all of us. You said, oh, I'm a poet, you are a musician. Ah, can you be a musician without, in fact, more than any other contemporary that I know, you're the one who brings, shall we say, you bring poetry into music or music into poetry? No, it's difficult. You bring the two together in such a forceful way, and so thank you very much for coming. I'm saying this right at the beginning because we may not have time to say it later. Yes, the bit you've just read, I think, comes from my acceptance speech for an award I won in China last year, one of the most important awards. I couldn't go because of COVID, so I had to then send that to be translated and to be read to the group of poets, international poets there. When you begin to say something matters, you are affirming, but you are not only affirming, you are also denying a certain premise. I say it all the time. I say, my friends come to me and say, Jesus saves, Jesus saves. I say, I have heard this a million times. Why do you still keep saying it? There are certain things we repeat, not just because of what they mean, but because of their implications and their connotations. When you see your friend a very cold morning and you say, oh my God, cold morning, how are you? We all know it is cold. Why are you saying it? When you say good morning, it is not the truth factor you are looking at. It's the feeling factor. The way these things keep human relationships and human bonding in good repair. So, poetry matters. In our present world, many people think that, well, it doesn't. My very first popular poem I wrote it in 1978 or so. It was published in 1983. The title is Poetry Is. It's just a doctrine. Poetry is not this. Poetry is not this. Poetry is not this. Second half, poetry is, poetry is, poetry is. Many people say it's more or less like the anthem or the manifesto for the second generation of Nigerian poets. But I didn't have any such thing in my mind. Often people say, yeah, nobody reads poetry. Why do you need to bother yourself? And in school, we were made. I'm so lucky. I was taught by the best teachers. But I also remember there were some teachers who made poetry not really. They didn't make it to impinge on our lives. You read a poem and you say this is, and the teacher will say, yes, it's a poem. That's why you don't understand it. Commit it to memory. So you cram and cram and cram. And I began to wonder, this is really not how it should be. Why? Nothing could be more poetic than Yoruba culture and Yoruba language. Our proverbs, our epigrams, maxims, our music, our festivals, everything about Yoruba art is functional one way or another. When I was young, I come from a large family. We have a head, Ilyasha, Chief Asha. Now he had a kind of compound where he adjudicated over cases, and people brought matters to him. My father used to take me to such places even before I started school. I would carry his keg of palm wine. Then I would listen. One day we were going to the farm. Yeah, my father was a farmer, real farmer, never went to school. My mother was a cloth weaver. Yeah, oh yes, but my father was a drummer and a community leader. My mother was a singer too. Used to sing as she hit the apasa on the one loom, the loom that you had, the vertical loom. So, yes, you passed the shuttle and you pass it and then you. Even when I was just by, she would be singing as she was doing walking. That.
Wow.
So the rhythm of the shuttle and the rhythm of her song blended in so many important ways. So my father, I asked my father, that compound, there are pillars there. He said, yes, yes. The pillars are carved. He said, yes. Do they have to be carved for them to be able to support the roof? And he laughed. Said, you are asking questions that are too advanced for your age, but I will tell you, no. The pillars support the roof. The carvings feed the eye and the mind. Yes, they give the eye something to eat. Now, I said, if I tell you I understood everything, then I will be lying. This episode didn't come to my mind until I was in graduate school in Toronto. Many, many, many years later, when we were dealing with the theory of meaning, the theory of poetry, and so on. And some people were saying form has nothing to do with content. It was then it came to me. In Yoruba epistemology, in Yoruba philosophy, in Yoruba culture, Iwulo ati Ewa, they are fused. You know, it is beautiful because it is useful. It is useful because it is beautiful. You know, so in Yoruba philosophy, in Yoruba logic, things are not always separated. Instead of saying this or that, you say this and that. These are the things at the back of my mind when I work. So when people then say, oh yeah, we live in a post-poetry age. And I say, everything is post now. Post-colonial, post-hermeneutic, post-industrial, post-humanism. I hope we do not arrive at that stage where we're talking post-human society. So poetry matters. That's why I had to what I have written there reminds me of things I have been reading that were written 1,000 years ago. You know, when people didn't even need to argue about it. But many people think we are now modern. Because we're modern, all these things do not matter. Again, coming back to your work, this is really what you tell us without really straining your nerves at all. Every time you put those compositions together, you get us dancing in so many ways. It's not just the beauty of your music, that is also the beauty of the movement of your ideas. And the way you rub it in extremely excruciating matters, you know, the way you get them into our system without our really. And this is, I think, why your demographic is essentially young. Yeah, because I interact with students, you know, young people, and I know, Beautiful Nubia is going to have a festival here, is going to have a show there, and so on. That gives me hope. Yeah, it does give me hope. Because I'm also looking at you within the context of contemporary Nigerian music. If I tell you I'm not worried by what I'm seeing in many areas, I'll be deceiving you. Most of the scenes, most of the songs remind me of Bronx in the US, or Brooklyn, and so on. Rap, so rap is great. I have nothing against it. I have nothing against hip hop. I have supervised research studies on hip hop. But many people have moved away from the original intent of hip hop. Hip hop was there in the 1960s, in the 1980s, to bring especially America back to the crucial matters of the moment at that time. To say no, the revolution will not be televised. If we do not do this, they were there to remind America the facts that America was running away from. They were useful, they were transgressive, they were irreverent, and so on. What do I see now? Big cars. People, you spend minutes and minutes and minutes on letting people know you've bought the most expensive car in Europe, and you bringing it to Nigeria, you are not talking about the state of our roads. You're not talking about poverty that you have all around. You're not talking about the fact that you might not even be able to ride this car, this expensive car, $400,000 without looking left or right, in case kidnappers and other people are around you. You know, music and the way we look at beauty, poetry, and the way we look at beauty, and the way we define it. For me, the beauty of the form is part of the essence of the beauty of the content. The beauty of the content is the beauty of the content derives from the usefulness of the content. I can distinguish between a beautiful poem and a pretty poem. The pretty poem is one superficial, but the beautiful one is the one that throbs and really takes you. As my father used to say, you don't hear good drumming with your ears. No, you hear it in your stomach.
Which brings me to my next question. You already talked about your dad, your mom, your father, your mother. When I've known about Professor Osundare. Abi, they can see me, Abi. For years, I've known about Prof. As a vet student at the University of Ibadan. Of course, we read some of the things. We had friends who were in all these other departments, and they would talk about him, and we read about him in the papers. He had poetry in the papers and stuff. But I remember 1992 when I went to serve, to do my national service in Enugu. I had a friend who studied, I don't know, it was English, must have been English at OAU. And he had all these books, and one of them was The Eye of the Earth. And I remember going to his house, and I picked this book, and I read it, and I couldn't believe it. And I was like, this is sweet, this is, it's hard to explain. So you can go out and get The Eye of the Earth. That one I can assure you, when you finish reading that one, you will never finish reading it. That's the thing about good books, because you keep going back. The Eye of the Earth by Niyi Osundare. You go and get that book, and it will change how you think about poetry. Because then you might start to say, they've been lying to us all this time, that poetry has to be inaccessible. That poetry is accessible, but it does something to you. It touches you really, really in the deep core of your soul. And you know what happened that day when I read that book? One of the things I said that day, I said, it would be nice for me to meet this man one day and ask him how he grew up. Because there's no way he's writing this. There's something about how he grew up. We need to know how this man grew up, that he can write. Because the writing in The Eye of the Earth, what's interesting to me about it is how it's mostly in English. But you might think you're actually listening to somebody talk to you in Yoruba. There's something, you go get the book, you get what I'm saying. It's very strange. So I thought, ento kowe, mabai, omo do agba gidi gidi omo adagba kakola sa magba gidi gidi omo adagba omo do agba. This person has so internalized all these things that it doesn't even have to work hard at it. That it's not become the way he can now use English, the other language, and it sounds like I'm listening to an old person speak to me in Yoruba. So I said one day if I meet this man, the only thing I want to hear from him is tell me about how you grew up. Who are you? How did you become this Iwi that can write all these things?
How I grew up. When they were teaching us literature in school, I kept on wondering, even right from the elementary school, they call this poetry. This is not in any way different from what I have been hearing at home. And where is home? Ikere-Ekiti. That was a time where there was no electricity in Ikere. I think I was there when the governor, premier then, came to declare our power supply open. That was 1965 or so. Everything was natural. Now, My father was named Osundare by his father. Osun runs through most towns and villages in Yoruba land, but Osun is just a few yards from our family home, and it also crosses the way to my father's farm. Actually, my first name was Olomi, because my mother told me I was a gift of the river goddess. Olomi, the river goddess is worshipped. Her name in Ikere is Ikere-Ekiti, the mother we pet, the mother we worship. It was later when I interacted with people from Oshogbo that we also knew that there was Oshun worship in Oshogbo. Ikere is a unique town. Little place at that time, but it had quarters. People from Are, that is other Ekiti towns, Are, Afawo, Agbado, Iluomoba, they are still there. Of course, Ikere, all of us know. Then there were people. There was a place called Oyo. I saw people with marks and so on. Then I discovered that these were people from Modakeke. Incidentally, my wife came from Modakeke eventually. From Modakeke, Oyo city itself, and to some extent, Ogumasho. Each group had its own festival. I loved those festivals. Ogun Festival, Oshun Festival, Shango Festival. Then there is also Oloba Festival. Oloba is the deity in charge of the earth. That is why earth is constant in all my works. Every morning, my mother, I was the only child then, when she woke up with the index finger, she would really actually be tracing, I didn't know what they were, on the floor. Babaye Barisha, wọ́n ní mọ̀ nǹkan ní ẹ̀rọ náà ni. Màá ti kẹ́ ṣẹlẹ̀ sí ọmọ nìkejì mi lẹ́ni o, òun nìkan jẹ́ ṣẹlẹ̀ sí mi. Yeah, I came from a very, very spiritual background. My father was a farmer. Oh my God. Big farmer, but he was a drummer and a singer and a song composer. I used to accompany him to places where new songs were composed. Wow. I tell you one, talking about the usefulness of poetry and music. Somebody stole yams. In those days, still it was unheard of. I still remember my father would give me, take these 3 yams to Orita, not far from our own farm. I would descend the hill, and then he would give me 3 stones to place on a leaf by the yams, and I would do that. At the end of the day, when we were about to leave for home, he said, let's go back to where you left the yams. The first time, I didn't see the yams. I said, Anticolo, that is, it has been stolen, and we laughed. When we got there, we saw Toro Meta, 3 pence, 3 pence in 3 places, placed on that same leaf. We did not know who bought the yam. That was the Nigeria I grew up in. Honesty, yeah, the poetry of it all, and then the philosophy of it too, So this was it. Each festival was a time of joy for me. Now, this guy stole yams, and it was unusual. He was a hunter. He didn't know that our hunter, Toman Bay, can you see, combat. He didn't know that somebody was on the farm. He didn't go home that night. He wanted to keep the night, and that one hid. So he saw this guy go to the barn of yams, and he picked a couple. The following day, the man who saw him went to the chief told him this is what I saw. He said, whoa. They called the song composers. My father was one of them. Yes. Usually when an infraction took place, on the 7th day, there will be some kind of rally in town. You will sing a new song, ridiculing that person, and Ikere had a special drum called Adam. So when people say, if you do that, they will beat Adam for you. That is, if you commit a crime, they will, without mentioning your name, but everybody will know at the same time. That's poetry, you know. So on the 7th day, they went out. Some people picked up fresh palm fronds. Some people picked up Ewe Odon and so on. You know. And it took 2 hours, and the thing was over. The following day, the guy disappeared from town.
Oh, wow.
He didn't come back until 3 years later. That was when our society had a sense of shame, when our society had conscience. Nobody mentioned his name. It was the poetry of do you know who so? It's the son of the father of a person who had only one eye. When he goes to the farm at night, he calls himself a hunter. But when he goes to the bush at night, he only shoots his gun at other people's yards. Yes. So I was reading all these fat books written by white people and so on, and they were defining poetry. I said, no, this is your definition of poetry. I have other definitions of poetry. You know, talking about beauty, beautifulness and usefulness. Yeah. So poetry establishes justice. The prayer is poetry. Nothing could be more poetic than incantations. And so on and so forth. Those are sentences and sayings exploring the vehicle of language and the vehicle of thought and the vehicle of culture, you know, especially symbols. So I say I'm very grateful to the culture that I grew up in, and it is not just Yoruba culture. Ikere was cosmopolitan. In the center of Ikere, that's where I come from, Odoja. That's why my first book was titled Songs of the Marketplace, because my mother measured the movement of time by the sound of the market, from the marketplace. The noise is going down. It's time for us to start making dinner. That Odoja was the place where, of course, where the market was, and there were also the Hausa Fulani community, and they had children. We were children, so we exchanged songs with them, and we exchanged Hausa words. In my father's compound, our extended family, we had an Igbo family. You know, I still remember one of them, Ejike, a friend, and his sister was Mwaga. I think both have come from, yes, Newi, from Newi. And Papa Okoye was from Oka. He used to make hoes. You know, that was when I knew, Oka people are very good blacksmiths, you know. Unfortunately, we lost all this to the Civil War because they moved away. We had Egugu, Kalaba, Yo every December. Then one of my uncles disappeared. Came back about a year or two later. I was wearing a turban. He was a Muslim. He became a Muslim. Ramadan time, we will all go there and eat rice. Christmas time, the children will also come to us. Nobody said you are this, therefore we are going to disadvantage you. No, that's the Nigeria I knew, and that's the Nigeria that we lost because of the Civil War and ethnic, I call it tribal deliberately, intolerance and so on. But in Nigeria that I know, it is still possible for us to regain. Yeah. So this is my background, one or two sentences on the literary side. Bless Chinua Achebe. I know he's resting in peace where he is. When I spoke to him and I said, thank you very much for opening the way, he would say, Niyi, you are a poet. I'm a storyteller. And I was saying, yeah, okay. The storyteller also taught us how to write poetry. Things Fall Apart is a novel I read and I keep going back to. It's amazing. You were talking about the use of language the other time. How that man was able to use the English language in such an Africanized way that language sounds natural in the mouth of an illiterate Igbo man or illiterate Igbo woman. He did that. Wale Soyinka was there. Look at what he did with the Lion and the Jewel. But my best by him in terms of drama is Death and the King's Horseman. Death and the King's Horseman. When I see people and I'm listening to them, they're on stage and they're, oh, what twist is this? That so. I say, this sounds like English, but it is actually Yoruba. Our friend, honest man, God bless him, rest him well, Akewumi Ishola, translated Death and the King's Man into Yoruba. In the process, he and I spoke, and he said, well, I don't know, it's all right. It's like translating from Yoruba into Yoruba. Wale Ogunyemi translated Things Fall Apart into Igbesiaye Okonkwo. Incidentally, he started that when we were in Leeds, in England, but he really didn't start the actual translation. He finished the thing here. African Studies, that's where he was, and I was doing vacation job there. So he used to try some of the lines on me. Again, the deep structural similarities between Igbo and Yoruba, it is amazing. Our cultures are more united than we, the people who speak them. And human beings are foolish people at times. When we are busy killing one another on the war front, our cultures and languages are making peace behind the lines. So this is why I say, yes, no society has ever progressed without developing its art, its music, its poetry, its fine arts, painting, sculpture. Yeah. Nigeria here, we have a false sense of priority. Oh, the reason we are not making progress is because we've not been paying enough attention to science. Now, let's downgrade the arts, and then, the Japanese will tell you, the technological wonder men and women of the modern world. I mean, every village you go to in Japan, you see matters of culture, really deep. We talk about Akai, we talk about Sunny, we talk about, what is it? Does anybody really ask how they came about these names? South Korea, which is the modern miracle too. In fact, they just translated some of my poems into Korean, about 244 pages. I'll be going there later in the year. When I was there, I was really, really surprised at the way that country is able to blend the beauty of its own culture with the exigencies of modern technology. They've done it so well. So, Hyundai, Daewoo, LG, Samsung, Kia are not accidents. They grew from the culture of the people. You can't separate the art and science. Writing poetry is scientific. Making music is scientific. Right. You're disturbing the airwaves, and you have to do this in a certain kind of way. When you begin to break things into rhythmical units, you're doing arithmetic, mathematics of it. Yeah. Finally, my own opinion is the really educated person is the one who sees connection between apparently disparate things and is also able to see the difference between two things that the world has always taken for granted as one.
So, Baba, thank you very much, Baba.
Oh,
So,
welcome.
I want to go back to your early days again. So, your father was a farmer and a drummer, a songwriter.
Song composer.
And
No,
then-
not songwriter. You are the songwriter.
So he was a music composer.
Yes.
And then your mother was a cloth weaver and also a
singer.
singer. So they had some children, apart from you, I bet.
Yes.
Yes. And so what was it like growing up? Because you mentioned a bit about one Agbala, one... Can we hear more about this?
Yes, my father was a polygynist.
Okay.
5 wives. My mother was the first, and so I'm the first male child. I have a sister who is a little older than I am from the other wife. So it was a large family in a way, but Baba was able to maintain discipline, and he was able to, because he was a very philosophical person and also practical and gregarious. He would tell you, well, you know a family when there is a disagreement and you pretend that it doesn't exist. So you're doing something, call you out. And I tell you, these days we say it's some kind of communal jurisprudence. I really remember the way quarrels were settled. Oh my God. The way they will wash out or wash down the guilty person, flog that person with the whip of words. That's why satire is my major is my major area, and I see that it is yours too. You know, you've taken it to the electronic stage. Yeah. So how to live in peace. My mother's favorite saying is, "Enukan ije kenukan awo." One mouth must not do all the eating, while the other mouths are merely watching. No. And, you know, covetousness, dishonesty, prevarication, gossiping, and so on. Laziness, those were no-go areas in our family. My father, in fact, people often tell my mother before she died, used to tell me that you are writing books the way your father was writing yarns. But I never saw the man, I never heard the man say, I'm tired. Walking was on the farm a week before he died. He's working, yes. My father would say, a normal person is either sleeping or if a normal person is not working really hard at work, it may be that that person is working or is eating. Those all other areas, no, that is no excuse for you not working. Your hands have to be busy. So that's where I grew up. There was a lot of discipline in the family. It had its great advantages, but I must say that for everything that has an advantage, there is also a disadvantage. It made me too fearful, especially when I had to leave home for the secondary school. You know, well, things that my mates would do without, the first thing I would think about is, what about if my father hears about this? What about if my mother hears about this? And they would then say that I was timid. Maybe I was lucky that I was that timid. I never got into trouble. This is how the book became my consort, became my mentor, became my company. I was always reading. I don't know how to break laws. And this is also how I become very, very critical when I see a society in which a few people have so much and the rest of us have so little or nothing at all. No, that kind of society can never have peace. You know, justice, peace and justice move together constantly. Again, this is one of the motifs in your works too. You know, when you, this is the world as it is. This is the world as it is capable of being. We are not there yet because this is what we are doing. You know, yes, some people are and other people are. Yeah. Our society has a lot to know. Yeah. We need to go back to our culture, but not in any atavistic or nativistic way. My attitude towards culture is selective. There are some aspects of our culture that we should do away from, do away with. Yes. For example, I think there is too much celebration in Yoruba culture. Ashwebi, Owambe, and so on. People are always, no matter how bad things are, people are always dancing. I like the motive of happiness. It's important for us to survive. But a cousin wrote to me the other time, yeah, we're going to bury our uncle, yes. Ashwebi Mary. I said, Ashwebi Mary. 4. What are you going to do with 4? We wear one to church. When we come back, we have to change. Then when we finish dancing because of the sweat, we have to change. This is why people steal in Nigeria, especially public officials. You can't maintain that kind of habit. So our culture is rich. Yoruba culture is expansive, just like many of the other Nigerian and some of African cultures that I know. But we have to be careful. We have to look at what happens to the Roman Empire. We also have to note what has been happening to the kingdoms and so on. When people push indolence, when people push enjoyment too much, it results in indolence and allied crimes. Nigerian culture, my Yoruba culture is rich. Without it, I would be nothing. Oh yes, I really am happy that I have that, and I'm grateful too. But my relationship to our culture is progressive and transgressive, because we have to move with the times without really getting soaked up and overwhelmed by the inanities and the madnesses of the modern world. We need to do more celebrating than celebrating.
More celebrating than celebrating. Very good. So we've heard about how you got your early cultural education and all that. So when did Western education come calling? How did that?
1953. I remember January. My father came. My mother was taking care of my immediate younger brother in another part of town, because that was where the Babalawo was. That was in Agbado. Oh yes, Agbado is one of the districts in Ikere that was settled by people from another part of Ekiti, and that's Agbado. Baba Odofin was a great man, a spiritualist, and I think the head of the Egungun court in Ikere, the Egungun festival, nothing like what I saw in Agbado. So I was there about 25 minutes, 30 minutes by foot from my father's own compound. So this morning my father came and was talking to his wife, my mother. And my mother was Ikere. In those days you had to stretch your right hand across your temple, over your head, to touch your left ear. And all that you but I had been worrying my father, because you can't imagine it, beautiful Nobia. My most immediate attraction to school was the music, the drumming.
Wow.
Yes, there was a school, early school, on the way to our farm. And it was morning, we were going to the farm, and these people would line up, and I would just stay there watching. And my father would, where you come? And I said, someday I too will be able to dance like these people. And someday I too will be able to be in that band, school band.
Wow.
I also wanted to learn A, B, D, A, F, E, G, B. ijikili mini o pirisishiti uwiyi. My uncle would be saying that I sounded like music in my ears, but I was looking at the letters. They look like magic to me. What is the connection between this ugly looking
and the
face
sound
I'm
is-
seeing and the beautiful sounds I'm hearing? You know, I've always been very, very inquisitive. So my father knew it. So he said, "Yeah, Mudebe." So, oh yeah, the agbada, some kind of agbada that they bought for me for Christmas was what I wore. And my father was working. I told this story in my acceptance speech of the Nigerian National Merit Award. Yes, 2014. Yes, when I was writing it, my mind went back to that day, my first day in school. My father was a tall, regal man. He didn't walk, he ran. You know. So, and I was there, you know, tottering, you know, behind him. So we got to school, and they looked at me, said, "Show the get back school." Benisa. Of course, they were teasing me. My first teacher was Mr. G.O. Ashake. He was my father's age mate. And his own parents sent him to school. So they said they will put me in front of the class. I said, yes. And then the teacher said, "You must not complain at home when we flog you here." I said, "Yes, sir." So that was, they put me in class 1B, St. Luke's School, Uro, Ikere-Ekiti. January 1953, that was how it began. 2 weeks later, the teacher put me somewhere because it was more or less like a trial and error kind of thing. But I took to education, to learning so frantically. At the end of the day, I will ask the teacher, "What can I read at home?" When I say, "You can't read yet, but your slate, just put this chalk and so on." No. So this was how it began, 1953. School then. We were in the colonial period. I mean, 1953 was 7 years before Nigeria became independent. But I tell you, school was very well organized. Very well organized. Chief Awolowo can never die. He and the other members of his cabinet, all those people who put their heads together in 1955. Oh, wait, before 1955, because the thing it began January 1955. So I spent 2 years sponsored by my father before education became free in 1955. In 1955 January, when the first day of school, you would have thought Ikere was at war. The streets were full.
Wow.
Children that had been kept at home.
People going to school.
Yes, especially the ladies. Some of them were already had already reached puberty. Yeah, they were running, you know, and with them is, many of them are professors and doctors and so on today. When we talk about leadership with a vision, this is why Awolowo can never escape our attention. Yes, leadership with a vision. He saw our future before we did, you know. So, 1955, I was in primary 3, and school became free. Now, they will give us afternoon meals. They knew that many of us came from poor homes, and we weren't consuming enough protein. And the brain, especially of a young person, needed protein. So, our meals were rich in ewa, and we had no money to serve at home, no meat. Well, except when my father's trap caught okete or or whatever. But I could eat in school, you know. Then the syllabus, the curriculum, there was a sense in which they wanted to educate us in Western education without our losing our cultural root. Yeah. Every week, one teacher or another must teach us a new song in Yoruba. ọmọdé ìlú ẹ wá wo ohun tánà mi ṣe o. Àgbààgbà ìlú ẹ wá wo ohun tánà mi ṣe o. Ó fún mi lọ́mọ, ó tún gbọ́mọ rẹ̀ padà. Ìyẹn ò dùn mí bówó mi tó máa gbé lọ. Awuyewuye ọ̀rọ̀ rẹ̀ aládùúgbò awuyewuye. And the other part of the other flank to say ọ̀rọ̀ rẹ̀ aládùúgbò and then so on. Then music was there. Then Yoruba was taught as a subject. Handwriting. Yes, handwriting. And then civics, morality, and so on. Of course, you say that we were empire boys and girls then. Our king was the king of England, and our river was River Thames, not River Oshun and so on. But we were able to get something, and no teacher dared miss class. The headmaster was always walking around. The headmaster was supervising the teachers. The headmaster himself was being supervised by another supervisor. Then another supervisor from the Ministry of Education would be there. Everything went well, you know. And my father was happy because when I was leaving for school, he told me, "Well, you're going to school today. You're going with one hand. I want you to return to me with two hands." Yeah, because you can only walk in balance when you are able to swing both hands by your side. Yeah, that's the kind of home I grew up in. My parents were thinking, feeling people. We didn't have much in terms of material possession. And I tell you that has shaped my own attitude about life too. If 2 pairs of shoes would be okay for me, why must I go for 5? If I need a car to take me around, why must I fill a whole driveway with 4, 5 cars and so on? When you eat, make sure that other people also have the opportunity to eat. Otherwise, you will not be able to sleep at night. That's what is happening to us now.
Yeah. So you excelled through primary school?
Oh my God. Yes. Oh, by the time I got to the 3rd year, oh yes, the difference was getting clear. By the time I was in primary 4, I was right in front of the class. That gave me another problem. In those days, you had to take a report card home every Friday. They held a meeting, the teachers held a meeting with the parents. Parents couldn't read, so they used the color code. First position, you enclose it in a red triangle. Second, you enclose it in a blue triangle. Third, you enclosed it in a Kandahar triangle. Kandahar was a kind of ink that was very, very black, and you couldn't rub it off. It was later I discovered that Kandahar is actually a place in Pakistan. Yeah, that's where the thing came from. Yeah. So my father mastered the colors straight away. When my father came back from the farm, before he took his meal, Lualu, card, where is your card? He said, "Open it, I will open it." Then you came home, it was a Kandahar. You say, those people came first and second. Did they come from heaven? You know. So he imbued me with the spirit of competitiveness and so on. That itself could push you to the final year. You know, because the band leader had to be somebody in the final year. Now, 1958, I was in primary 5, and that was the penultimate year. So they needed somebody to take over from the one in primary 6. And of course, the teachers reached out to me. I became the band leader. In those days, we had Empire Days. One day in the year on which all the schools in Ikere will meet in the center. That's Holy Trinity School in Ikere, and have inter-school sports, competitions and so on and so forth, and then send a message to the empire. But we will have to dance from our school to that place. So, as the band leader, I was the one in charge of the big one, you know. So somebody will carry it in front, another one here. I will be at the back, and my hand like this, and the small ones. It was like a dream come true. Because my father came from the farm and said, I really go to Lulu. Or pussy, or carry, you know. So
he was so happy.
He was so happy because his own was butter. You know, butter tiwa, butter kiti to see butter or yo. Then do return you know, high pitched skinny. Then the bass gone in butter. Then each year, the final year students had to place for the entire school and the community, Ikere community, as a way of saying goodbye. I had been looking forward to that too. So I was prepared for it. Our boile, you will find all this in Professor Sule's book. I was lucky to come from that kind of family, which I call the obscurantist insanity. You know, every work of art has to have some bit of obscurity, because I use two metaphors about poetry. A poem is not like a harlot who agrees even before you ask. But at the same time, a poem is not a nun who will never agree no matter how hard you ask. A good poem is honey in the rock. You have a good axe and plenty of energy. You will have to do a lot of work, but eventually you will find it. And it will be for you a thing of eternal joy. This is really how it should be. I tell my creative writing people, the most difficult poem to write is the simple poem. Take the Bible, take the Quran, take Esaifa. No. You will understand what it is. Of course, esoteric language is there, here and there, but it's an attempt to communicate. Poetry is music. You know, what is music if you can't even hear it? What is poetry if your mind cannot interpret it because your mind has not heard it?